You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way.
And I got an natural 20 in my initiative, so I will welcome you to the party as my opening action. I'm Warlord Scarr, a master of all things tactical and decisive combat related, as seen by the 20 I rolled. And joining me today is...
Loser goes last. It's me. It's Savage Mick. I rolled next. I'm next highest. I'm going next.
And lastly, it's Owen, because I don't roll terribly well in initiative.
You make up for from planning.
Absolutely.
Right.
So,
what are we talking about?
We are here to talk today about initiative in games, or turn order, or basically the thing that determines how often someone takes their actions in a game, and what are the different ways of determining it.
I will take up the role of the person on the web who, when anyone suggests anything other than the standard, they go, I demand the right to roll dice to determine the order in which I roll dice to see if I get to roll dice.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the standard initiative system.
You do raise an interesting point. That is like, why on earth are we doing this? This is crazy. What are we? I mean, it's just rolling dice for the sake of rolling dice. It is exciting. Yeah. Who's going first?
Here's the thing, is that we often blame, like, as with so many things let's start with RPGs in this. But like so many of these things, everyone automatically blames, it's because D&D did it that way, and everyone else followed it. And as with a lot of these accusations, it's actually one of the things that D&D turned into as the initial sort of thorny, half-formed, barely designed version of D&D made its way out into the open world, and then just crashed into the demand for RPGs, and all the edges got sanded down. Because originally, D&D had what we would today call more like wargame initiatives, because it was based on a war game, where it was one side goes and then another side goes, and which side went was just your classic win game roll at the start of combat, where each side like roll a d6, let's see who goes first, or we see the version AD&D where it's roll a d6, but if you roll a 1 or a 2, you're surprised for that many segments of your 1 minute combat round, which is actually 10 rounds. AD&D was weird, but the point was that originally D&D had what I think were all the monsters, either all the monsters would go and then all the players would go, or vice versa. And that was the way it happens. And I suspect the fact that it sort of transitioned over the time to we'll call the DEX check, right, or the fastness check or agility check version of game where you roll dice, determine, etc., etc. That is because a lot of players would just have I said I was standing 10 feet away from the fighter at the start of the combat, and we lost initiative, and because I was the obvious target, all the orcs charged me, and I was torn to shreds without getting in a single action. And this would have been a very common thing in early games, and the early war gamers and people like our guy would say, yeah, that's how it's supposed to go. You should have been in formation the whole time. Player skill.
Can I just use this as an excuse? Like you mentioned you go for, one side goes first. It's the earliest version you do. Can I just take this as an excuse to talk about the 10th edition of Warhammer 40,000?
By all means.
A game I know nearly nothing about, but if you're on the internet, folks, if you're in the game space, YouTube's aflame. It's all, are those people okay? But it was revealed to me in a dream, and also probably some patch notes, that the 10th edition of the premier people in space fighting over planets wargame still uses the I'll move all my guys and shoot, and then you move all your guys and shoot.
Yeah.
Method of what? I was genuinely shocked. I stopped playing in Second Head. That's counts on fingers. 8 editions ago. I was genuinely horrified to discover that this is still the case. Like, they have a design team, right?
Yeah,
Have they ever played another war game? Like, I've played a lot of other war games since and discovered the joy of unit activation, which they've just announced they're going to use for their new epic scale game.
Yeah.
It'll
Well,
be
Epic,
Unity.
I think, always had unit-based activation, alternating activations. I think
It's been so long, I don't remember,
Yeah.
but it sounds about right. But like, it's crazy. So
Oh, it's
we very quickly, to go back to what we're actually talking about, we very quickly realized, that's collective we, that's all of you, that this was a good way to get your wizard ganked and no fun had, and move to, well, we need something else. So we'll roll for initiative.
I have seen one good argument in favor of I go, you go. And it's not a great argument, but it is an argument for it.
Lay it out.
You can go get a beer or go to the loo during your opponent's
I'll leave while my opponent cheats.
That's it. It's not a good argument because you're less engaged with the game. But basically, the thing is, you can then have a chat with your mate while your opponent's doing his movement phase and presumably cheating outrageously. But
if it's 40k, I can attend a tanning session.
while he moves his grot horde up, you know.
Oh, surprise initiative roll! Who's this?
Yes.
Sorry,
It is.
initiative is so low. I still have to wait for my turn to come around.
We are joined by a very special guest, one and all. I'd like to introduce you to. How would you like to be introduced, dear sir?
That is the question.
It is the question. A long-time listener, a fervent adherent to the rule of cool, an acquaintance of some of ours, and a friend to most. The question, very welcome to, is this your first appearance in the Adventuring Party?
I believe so.
I also believe so. And it is, in fairness, is it not what we believe that is truer than what is? But we'll leave the philosophy another time. We are, of course, discussing initiative.
Yeah. And like we were just saying, the current topic is you having all of one side go in a fight and then all other ones. I suspect that our turn is over, it's the monster's turn now. I suspect there were a few war gamers for who the I can go up and go to the bathroom thing might have been a bit of a plus because they were the guy at the back, with AC-20 shield, just and their action would have been, I throw my sling at them. I rolled a 5. Okay, I'm going to the kitchen. I'm going to get myself a sandwich. I suspect
ladders were smaller back then. What?
I don't know. It's possible, but yeah, it did. It may have worked for people used to. Or may have, again, along with a lot of the flaws of early D&D, I suspect it was literally because that was how so many war games worked that they never even considered that. The general RPGing public may want a better system until
I genuinely think that it's one of those cases with a lot of technologies where people just do the same thing for a long time because it just doesn't occur to anybody to do something different or to try something. Like the innovation is surprising because it seems so obvious in hindsight.
And I don't know exactly which RPG. I'm sure I can find an article on some blog explaining which RPG was the first one to suggest the everyone has their own initiative. You roll a DEX check or whatever. But I suspect it was not original D&D, and then people who thought that was a better system probably house ruled it into D&D, and then along comes second edition D&D, and like many house rules, have just got rolled into the D&D rule set, and that's when everyone started blaming D&D for having this terrible, system, like so many things on the internet.
Any of you guys ever play Earthdawn?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you remember Earthdawn's initiative system?
Something to do with a wheel.
Oh, hold on. That's
Exalted.
Hold on. Earth Dawn is the canonical precursor to Shadowrun.
Use a
Which
different
and
system.
Shadowrun, or did it use a different initiative?
Yes,
Because
it does.
Shadowrun has a very interesting initiative system.
Which
Go
we'll
on,
get
lay it
to,
out for
which
us.
we'll get to.
Yeah.
Earthstone is declare action, roll initiative, resolve actions. That's Earthstone. Every round you roll initiative. And every round you say what you're doing
And you have to
before
save
you
for it,
know
yeah.
what you're before you know what order you're going in the round. Crazy. And very weird, because sometimes like, okay, I was going to melee attack that guy. He has now run away or dived into a hole. I cannot get to him, melee attack him. So I guess I stand there. Right.
Yeah, and that
and it kind of preserves momentum in a system, in the idea that having committed to an action, you're going to have to carry through, and it may be that your target wasn't where you thought they were going to be, but you have moved, you have taken a swing, and now you're somewhere else in the battlefield. It's not a case of just, oh well, I'll hang on and see what happens. There's a certain sort of rough and tumble hoi polloi to that I think is quite interesting.
Yeah, but
Scarr.
like I suspect, while it has interesting outcomes, it also probably had a lot of frustrating outcomes. Much like the surprise system of early in D&D had segments where your tactical veteran fighter would suddenly stand around Gormless being stabbed for 2 minutes because of some dice rolls. Like I do genuinely think that and a lot of people do complain about the whole, roll dice, order dice, etc. system. I do think the reason that it is it developed naturally out of that homebrewing and in the RPG community, and then was eaten by D&D, is because it is harder to argue against. It tastes like it is fair in a certain sense, like, because everything's randomized and you're probably not going to get too many monsters or players grouped up and just destroying the other side like you would get in a side-based game. It feels more fair through this application of randomness. But the negative things of where, like, all of a sudden each character is their own island is the main. Like, would you say that as the main drawback of this? Everyone rolls their own initiative system is that it sort of reduces the benefit of teamwork substantially, and therefore people are meant to act on their own, and that therefore we get this sort of shift in design from a sort of more minimal team-based game like older D&D to the more modern D&D, where everyone has a plethora of actions to do in their turn because they can't do teamwork together. Each individual has to have their own special tactics.
Well,
At least that's the conspiracy I've heard.
Well, what I think happens is your entire style of play ends up molding to fit the initiative system in the game that you're playing. Like, just as an example, recently released game that just come out is Xenonauts 2, which, for those who aren't aware, it's a computer game, but it's a sort of a tactical RPG, very much in the XCOM mold. And I was watching this video of a guy explaining how the game works, and how he does is he explains, it's XCOM, but it's not like the XCOM some of you might be familiar with, namely the recent Firaxis one, but it's more like the original XCOM. And he made a really interesting point, which was that the new XCOM had an initiative system in the game, which is very much one guy goes, another guy goes, and it can be a human or it can be an alien, depending. Whereas the original XCOM's initiative was all the humans go, and then all the aliens go. And that, depending on which one you're using, can really make you change your tactics. Like, the new XCOM has a system where very much people realize that one way of gaming it was to basically arrange and move their characters in such a way that they'd put themselves very much in the open against a single target, but do it around that target's initiative. So hopefully they'd have killed the target before it had gotten around to their initiative. which is a tactic that might not work in the everybody goes and then all the aliens go, because maybe you got an alien that's going higher in the initiative, but nobody's going to be within range of it, whereas they are going to be within range of the target alien. Whereas if it's all the humans going, then all the aliens going, that tactic would fail because you'd be still out in the opening and shot by one of the aliens. So I think, like I said, I think depending on how the initiative system works in the game, players will modify their tactics or teamwork or whatever to fit into how the initiative system works.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in that older system, you do really want to kind of support each other a bit more. You can't let anyone kind of creep past the envelope of safety too much, because they're going to face a barrage of fire.
Yeah, because this is the thing about the wizard hiding behind all the hirelings with tower shields, because if he otherwise he would get hit in the first segment of the combat round and wouldn't be able to cast spells, and that's why you get these old school, hireling based things where everyone was in formation, and they would sit, people, you hear this talk about people giving notes to the GM explaining their formation so that the GM could not accuse them of being out of formation at the time. And people would rigidly say, "Oh no, we were in formation the whole time. I was behind Jerry and Billy when I pulled that lever. Don't worry about it."
Let's talk about Shadowrun.
Okay.
Owen.
Absolutely. So
Hida-O-Win.
Shadowrun is interesting because when you build your character in Shadowrun, you need to look at your initiative score. Because if your initiative score isn't high enough to get you more than one action, you need to start again. That's what's fascinating about Shadowrun, is you basically roll initiative, and that determines effectively how many initiative passes you get. So how many actions you get that round. It's all about wrapping around so you get to do more. There was a much lower intense version of this in the SG1 RPG, the Stargate RPG that AEG put out, which was a D20 mod, which featured a function where if you rolled your initiative and people had like skills to increase their initiative score, you could reduce your initiative by 20. So long as it's still a positive number, you got to go again that round, but that was your new initiative score. And they also gave you a way to refocus to increase your initiative so that you could basically go 2 actions in a round. Yeah. And that was interesting.
Effectively, the length of a combat round is set by the fastest character.
Yeah.
Because it's actually the number of actions taken in that round before you reset. And Shadowrun, yeah, so you're mechanically incentivized to go, well, if I can get like to 60 initiative and we're ticking down by 10, that's 6 actions. And in an action economy, I'm 6 times killier than the next guy.
Stonks are up.
I think
yeah, to the moon.
I think it's the old adage, but it does feel a bit like I'm playing chess, they're playing checkers. Is that you almost start going, well, I could make a character that focuses on X, Y, and Z, or I could just focus on initiative, and that's going to be good for almost everything.
Yeah, because if I can't do anything particularly well, at least I can do it more often than somebody else.
Yeah,
it's so there's this, and it's, I think in paper and pencil systems, this is an open question, like trying to balance off, because in many ways it's a kind of a cool thing to do as well. If you're a tooled up cyber ninja, yes, you do move like the Flash. Yes, you do see those 6 seconds of combat, way different from anyone else, because you react to everything. Now, how to mechanically balance that so that you're just not dominating the game is an open question.
Part of the issue with that kind of multi-action combat system is in game. Yeah, your character is doing everything, firing 50 bullets and doing 3 backflips in the space of 3 seconds. That's fine. Out of game, you're actually probably taking longer for your combat round because you're rolling twice as many dice. And
you better not be the guy at the table who goes, let me see, I gotta add, is there another bonus? Just need to look up this. You better be 100% on top of this. You should have some sort of action matrix in front of you. That looks like an accounting matrix.
Is right there, because the second you're like, okay, this is going to take about half an hour to resolve my turn, guys.
Get out. Leave. You're playing a troll wizard now.
Yeah.
You get one action. Okay, then popcorn, I think, is the next popular one.
Popcorn is very popular, though. Again, I've seen people blow up at Popcorn Initiative and get very, very annoyed at it. I watched someone
let's
said.
define it for the listeners.
So in
Popcorn
Popcorn Initiative, a player gets to go, and then they get to pick whether another player or the bad guy goes. And usually, another player going involves spending a meta resource of some sort to get it. Otherwise, it's just all the players go, then all the bad guys go. So it is like, okay, I go, and then the bad guys go, and it goes back and forth like that. Sometimes I get to spend a meta resource and 2 players go in a row, or sometimes it's I choose a bad guy to go and I get a meta resource. But it's basically it's a little more interactive because that's one of the things you pick. You go, okay, do that next.
And why is it called popcorn? Is it because the group can kind of pop off with these combos because they're getting to choose who acts first, the sequence of action, and then we could act 1, 2, 3 of us could act in tandem, one after the other.
Almost
so that's kind of a popcorn.
Pop.
Yeah.
You now pop, I pop. And back and forth. Fine system. Some people hate it. I've watched people say I had to house roll this immediately, do a regular dexterity test. And I was like, there's nothing wrong with it, guys. It's just you go, and the bad guys go. You go, the bad guys go.
And it encourages that thing that Scarr you were mentioning, that sometimes you're lacking kind of interactivity or comboing between players.
Yeah,
so
and
it gives you the option to do that.
Organize, because it does give you a lot of input on when people go, but also choosing which of the monsters gets to go can also be very flexible, because then you can sort of see if the GM will move a big monster out of formation and let them be isolated, or break up a team, or we know that the wizard's about to fireball us, so let's have him go first and then have the cleric go next to heal all of us, or vice versa. There does add this kind of tactical depth, but it also you're sort of like what are the complaints you've been seeing about this, Owen? Was it just that this seemed so unrealistic that the players were basically choosing which things to go, or was there some other source?
It was a visceral revulsion that this is wrong. This is wrong. This isn't how it's done. And there was quite little thought put behind it. I felt it was more like this is not how it's meant to be. This is too different and strange. Why are you changing this? Just a very strong revulsion reaction.
Would it be fair to say that initiative systems, like so many other things in game systems, should probably be chosen to reflect the tone or theme or kind of the milieu of the game you're trying to play, of what the system's trying to do? Like hard, gritty systems should have these really unforgiving initiative systems, and more kind of 4-color comic booky systems should have, you give players more choices to who acts when, that kind of thing.
I agree. I think an example, just like what Mick is saying, of that plays into I suppose the story that the game's trying to tell, is the PlayStation game Persona 5, which, for those who haven't played it, it's a kind of combination, real modern world or RPG with paranormal elements. But like one of the big themes running through the entire game is the notion of connection to your fellow party members and connection to your friends. And as a result, one of the systems that they introduce in the game it's called the pass the baton, where essentially or baton pass, sorry, where basically if you've increased your relationship with certain characters, you build up more of a bond with them. And one of the benefits of that is in combat, if you perform certain actions, you can then basically give up the rest of your turn to allow another character to tag in and go earlier in the initiative, but they then get bonuses to their combat scores from you tagging them in. So again, I suppose it plays into one of the game's kind of themes and gameplay mechanics of building up camaraderie with your other party member.
Yeah, because like the place I've seen the popcorn initiative the most was Wrath and Glory for 40k, and that's very big, bombastic, combat game where you're meant to be this group of professionals going into a dangerous situation and taking it apart, and therefore that level of tactical control suits it. Or at least that would be my read of why they chose that kind of popcorn initiative for that game.
Also quite common in Star Wars, or 2D20, sorry, for from Odysseus. They use it quite a lot, and it's quite good. You sometimes feel out-activated by bad guys, which always is a little rough if you know alternate activating war games. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm very badly outnumbered here. This doesn't feel good.
Yeah, like that's the thing is like if you have a situation where there's like 3 party members and 7 bad guys, then it can start to feel like side initiative, no matter how you split up the initiative pops. So that initiative system works best in a situation where you have this about the same number of enemies as people, and then you can create a system. You can get a situation where you have sort of 3 of the bad guys are dead, so now everyone's sort of ganging up on the poor bad guys, and in a certain sense that's okay because it's finishing up the combat more quickly. But
That makes sense.
at the same time, it can feel very unfair if you're the GM who's trying to get that last goblin to just to scratch, just to tickle the players a little, but there's no activations left for him, and he just gets horribly squished.
The GM doesn't get to feel anything. That's not their job. They no, GMs aren't real people. Let's get that straight.
Before we go on to possibly the more rules light version of this, we maybe want to talk to one of the more in-depth ones, like attempts to solve this issue. The exalted combat wheel comes to mind, and the tick system. I know there's probably some other games that have used something similar, but it's not widespread for various reasons. And specifically, I'm talking about like the first and second ed versions of the tick system, where everyone would roll initiative their DEX plus awareness, I think, or was it insight plus awareness? I can't remember.
Join battle had a second ed was I think DEX plus issue, but it was specifically the join battle roll.
So you roll a battle roll. You probably some people will roll 3 dice, and some people will roll 27 dice because they had special charms for it. And the idea was that the person rolled the highest, they would be on tick 0, and then everyone else would be put however many successes behind that person. That would be their position on the chart, and then every tick, the person who was up, whenever the tick came along to the next person, they would have 1 second of action where they would move, and if they chose, they could take an action. What action they took on their turn determined how many ticks further down the line they would go. So if they were swinging a big heavy weapon, they'd have big damage bonuses, one would hope, although that didn't really help in Exalted because of the way stats work. But anyway, they would have like a speed 7 gigantic anime sword that destroys the earth. And then you'd have your rogue would have a speed 4 action with their daggers, and so they would be going almost twice as often as the thing, but they would have, in theory, they would have much lower damage because they were using daggers. And now this was an attempt to sort of split the difference between the multi-action success of something like Shadowrun, where optimizing for speed gave you more actions, but sort of maintain the sort of granularity of, it's not like your one action lets you take half an hour on your turn. It's that you just sort of over the course of the game, your tactical decisions each round would determine where things happen, and you'd have this back and forth in theory. In practice, it was very difficult unless you had like I've seen these kind of cardboard cutout wheels that people would design to put tokens on, so that
Yeah.
they would have to figure out, like, well, okay, so he moves three ticks this way, and then you roll. He gets pushed 7 ticks forward because of this effect, and okay, so you're acting next turn. No, I'm gonna guard because I can see the big guys coming, so I'm gonna spend the next 3 ticks building up a guard bonus so they can parry him, and it was an attempt, but it showed itself become unworkable in most situations.
So I have a confession in that Hida ran a Exalted game, which I was a player of good number. We ran it for the best part of the year, right?
Yep.
And I, not to brag, but I'm consider myself a fairly smart individual. I've mastered a number of disciplines. I'm quite good at spotting certain things as part of my real life, my job. But when it came to the Exalted system, it might have been for every Tuesday. It's like now combat and initiative comes. And this is the portion of the evening when everyone is going to speak Finnish. And I'm just going to sit here and nod because I have no clue what's going on. And occasionally we'll point to the copy protection device from Monkey Island 2 that's in the middle of the room. I'm going to go, sure, whatever it says. You get 3 actions this ride. Well, 3 actions. Or, now it takes 9. Great. Don't ask me to explain why, but sure, I'll go with that.
That sounds
And
right.
that was
Fair enough.
largely part of my experience in playing
So, question: would you say that you've sort of run into some initiative systems that are, for want of a better word, mystifying?
The easiest way, I suppose, of putting it is, it's very much like this is a system that runs on a certain level of base logic that you can either get or you can parse. And then there's systems of this system works on a series of mathematics that's so high level it might as well be magic to you. And you can either just say go with it or not, because you're not figuring it out.
Plug in the numbers.
Somebody wrote a combat tutorial for Exalted tick-based combat. It's 30 pages. I just posted it to.
Is that Combat 101, I believe?
Is it somewhere?
That's Combat 201.
Oh yeah, because
it's slightly more advanced stuff. No, it's more advanced stuff. So I remember running that, and I have occasionally problems with. Some of my players are big into mechanics, some aren't. And I had 2 players in that who are quite into mechanics. So I said, okay, I got to build a proper boss NPC for these guys to fight. And I built effectively a bad guy who was a Firecast terrestrial Exalted, who had effectively a speed 3 sword.
Mm-hmm.
And I built him so that he would take on with a decent challenge to the whole party. And one of my players, who's pretty mechanically savvy, said, right, I'll fight this guy 1-on-1. And he steps forward to challenge him. And your man's like, really? I'll take on all of you. And he's like, nope, 1-on-1, mano a mano. And I go, okay, roll join battle. We both roll join battle. He goes 6 steps before the player. And the player's like, okay, let's see how bad this gets. And your man goes, I attack. I make 5 attacks into you. And he goes, okay, I'm taking a few hits here. That sucked. And he goes, okay, 3 ticks later. He's still 3 ticks ahead of you. He attacks. He gets 5 attacks into you. He goes, okay. 3 ticks later, he goes again. He's going, this is his last attack before you go in. At which point he gives the signal to the rest of the players, the fix is in! Jump him! So it was a funky ass system, and it was very heavy. It was very, very heavy. And kind of manipulating the timing of it was very important. And the system got so mad that you had to have, effectively, you could die in the initiative roll. You weren't dead, but you were going to die. You were in serious trouble in the initiative roll. And you had to build a specific thing called a paranoia combo to deal with the fact that someone might try and instigate you. And so you had to have a combo built that, okay, this is my paranoia combo. If someone makes perfect attacks at me, I use my perfect defense. because otherwise I'm in trouble. Third Ed fixed a lot of the problems, but second edition combat was too hard to run, full of newbie traps and madness, and it was not a fun game to try and run at
I'm
all.
not sure I want to dedicate the 3 hours necessary to explain third ed combat. But
It's a lot
was-
better. It's a lot better than
was
second
fine.
ed combat.
Yeah,
It's
it
a
was
lot
fine.
better than second ed combat.
It just involved a lot of choices that you'd made up front that you better be across.
yeah.
You write a lot of notes for yourself. Okay, look, we've seized the initiative on this one, I think, quite well.
Well, I just wanted to
Go
talk
on.
about one last thing, and that is
I was inviting you to talk about one last thing, but you've jumped in. You're talking about one last thing.
taking the initiative, which is odd because what I'm about to talk about is games that have discarded the concept of initiative.
Ooh.
And this is a common thing I see in the new wave of indie games like Powered by the Apocalypse and Blades in the Dark, where they have decided just not to worry about this idea of when people start, because they're very narrative games. They're not assuming that all the players are going to be in every scene. And so they don't have this in-depth thing, and they generally don't have stats for NPCs beyond health and damage totals or whatever. So, and also one of the big things about it is I was particularly in the case of Powered by Apocalypse is that there isn't the sense of the bad guy go, the player go, the bad go, the player go, like there was in this game. Rather, it's the player will get their opportunity to choose their move, and then they'll choose whatever move they're going to do, or they'll describe their action. The GM will think about it. Okay, this will work, or this can't work, so try something else. And they get to a point where they roll dice, and the dice explain the consequence of the action. And it's not that generally it's not that the bad guy took their turn and stabbed you. It's that, oh, you rolled a 7+, which means you get to do all your damage to the bad guy, but they get to do some damage back. And depending on the degree of success, you can reduce that damage or do bonus damage to them. And that's the interplay. And then once that is over, you get after you've done that move, you go back to, okay, those consequences have happened. What are you doing next? Or if you are in a group situation, the GM is supposed to intuit, well, okay, he's had his 3 moves in the spotlight. We've had this back and forth flurry. We could say that's his camera cut. And we move back over to another player who's doing something completely different. They're trying to do something sneaky or their own combat or trying to figure out something magical. And you're that then you would do them, but there's no order. There's no, after you've done this, you then would switch to another player. It's entirely GM is supposed to realize the sort of where the dramatic weight of a scene or a group encounter is, and sort of switch back and forth between people dynamically, and put sort of the camera on the players who are doing it to suit. And then again, because the focus is on what does the character choose to do, and then determines what the consequences of that are. You're in this sort of drama focused mindset, but does that necessarily automatically translate to, I know what the dramatic moment to switch back over to cut away to what another character is doing, or to change scenes? Like, are the rules this maybe in fact the mark of a well-designed part of the Apocalypse game would be, does the advice in the book and the mechanics of the storytelling teach a GM when to switch focus in this situation where you don't have a turn, as it were?
I mean, it's gonna come down to the individual game, how well that's handled and how well the GM is advised on what to do. Like, you can do the ones where no one gets a turn. Not everyone gets a turn, I'm a huge fan of it because most people like to have a turn, even if their turn is don't do much, you know. They like the option, you know.
Yeah.
But if someone's not there, people understand. I don't get a turn. I'm not there. That's fine. But yeah, tricky one.
There
Tricky
are
one.
systems. There is there's some kind of system where you might not get a turn. This, I was reading about it recently. No, never mind. However, I would propose, I'd
Inquisitor.
ask for some. Is it Inquisitor?
Old Inquisitor, you could never get it. But you had to roll to see how many actions you get.
Yeah.
You could get 0 actions.
Right. Here's what I propose, and help me out here. This might have been done already. Has anyone put together a system where you bid on your placement in the initiative order?
Yes, there's that awful board game, the one that takes a million years, and you can choose.
Is it Puerto Rico?
Twilight Imperium. Twilight Imperium.
Okay.
Oh, so good.
Now that I think about it, it actually comes up a bit often in board games.
It
There
does.
was Shogun, which then got changed when they lost the Shogun TV license and became Samurai Swords, I think, was another one where it was like, aha, we will bid to see who gets the going first, and those who don't get bonuses or koku or something.
Yeah.
Help me out here. I'm not going
So
mad.
You bid.
No, I think you're right.
You drew. Yeah, it was a random draw the swords. But if you bid, everyone picked in order. So if I bid 5 koku, I get to look and pick which of the 5 swords to pick, and that was sword 1 through 5. And then after that, you did anyone else who bid picks, and then if nobody bid at all, everyone draws randomly. So often early game, it was just everyone draws randomly, and then late game, when it was crucial to see who got to attack or defend first, or
gets
other
more
forces,
intense.
that's when you start bidding to see who gets to go first.
Yeah, I think it'd be an interesting mechanic to borrow for a role-playing game. So in the sense that you build a pool and you roll it, and you have to secretly bid for initiative, and then whatever's left from the pool are the dice you'd use for the action you want to take. Something along those lines. I'm not sure that anyone's done anything like it, but it strikes me that it might be, one way to unlock new ideas in initiative and role-playing games. It's
kind of cool, but it better be absolute dynamite gameplay out of it, because you're eating up a lot of time.
Yeah.
Having people think about, like, it's bad enough rolling for initiative once. It's bad enough rolling for initiative every round. It's super bad when people are thinking about how much of their resources to bid on who gets to go where. It needs to be enabling some really hot gameplay to be worth that extra effort, because that's the part of it. To an extent,
well, it's an interesting market. Who are you bidding against? Are you bidding against the other players? Or are you bidding against GM?
You should be bidding against your opponents. Now,
yes.
If that's usually
so is that 4v1? Is that like, so again, it comes down to this marketplace. Would there be some, and what are you bidding on exactly? Is there some sort of track that's open information? But we can come to that in another episode. I think we're just about done here now. Although it should be mentioned that we have, let's see, what was it we usually use here? A Discord. We've got a Discord, folks. Check for a link in the show notes. We have been graced today. I'm going to wrap this up now. Scarr, you're going to take us out. But we've been graced today with the question, who kind of posed this question. No, you didn't pose because you posed a different question another time. But the question, we hope you've enjoyed your time here on the Adventure Party for your inaugural episode. Perhaps not the last. Question, say something cool.
I am not the answer. I am only the question.
Hida-O-Win, who is across most initiative systems I've ever seen. He's first to fight and last to fall. Anything you want to add for this episode?
We roll dice to determine the order in which we roll dice to see if we get to roll dice. Ponder that, koan, the next time you consider recomplicating your initiative system, or indeed simplifying it.
Scarr, the Warlord, the initiator of atrocities, the master of combat, the progenitor of this episode. To you falls the final action.
I declare victory and go Disneyland. This party's over.
Thank you for listening to The Adventuring Party. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can head on over to SpeakPipe and drop us a line. Or you can join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or Twitter, or you can email the hosts at party@theadventuringparty.net. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license, but you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye.